And greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past. Well, we forgot to take care of the echo. I thought I was so slick tonight. Anyway, the results are always positive here. We might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You will be safely traveling with us as we endeavor to treat, cure, and prevent the disease of ignorance. This is the voice of the revolution, and we are streaming to you live with our good friends at Revolution Radio on freedomslips.org, the number one listener supported network in the entire country. The chat room is already filling up. I don't know why you guys couldn't hear any audio. I think I had it set correctly. I think you can hear me now. Let's see who was first in the chat room tonight. Wow, a lot of people here. East Coast 20 was first. Everybody's here. I know you guys get tired of me recognizing all the people in the chat room, but I do like to see who's in here. Let's see, Boo's here. For the Birds is here. Oh, that's good. I like that. New person. Distant Sight is here. East Coast 20, JCW. Deborah Pollard's here. Tatanka Dave, Stanley Mays, Alm 3, Texas. Karen Draper's here. That's good. Over on YouTube. Very good. Very good. Let's see. Duck Goer is here. Boy Dogs 2 is here. Woof woof. Let's see. Who else is here? 86 Troll, Della Meow, and Coates. All right. Okay. It's good. I could spend a good part of the show just recognizing everybody. Nobody in Foxhole yet. We're just waiting on the crew to show up. It's still dark outside. Freyas, is that how you say it? Freyas? That's pretty good. All right, we have a lot to talk about tonight. The space launch got delayed. Leaks in the fuel tank. I'm thinking to myself, dudes, you had like 5 years to check the tanks for leaks. So you're going to do the wet test. You get a little voice. No, we have a fuel leak. Everything's delayed. NASA, get your shit together. You're in the space business, for crying out loud. All right. I want to talk a little bit about Peter Schweitzer's book, The Invisible Coup. We have presidents of countries. We have Mexico saying, that's not true. We're not using our consulates to take down America or take back any land in America. Guys, President Scheinbaum, if it's in Peter's book, it's true. Okay? I've read his books. He does a great job. He backs everything up with facts. He does not use anonymous sources. He does his job. But this is incredible it's something that we discussed in Glance of Angels. Birth tourism. It especially from China, it really exploded under the watch of Obama. And it allowed Chinese nationals, including Chinese Communist Party officials, I'm talking red hat, green uniform, goose stepping Chinese Communist Party soldiers, to have babies in the US and claim birthright citizenship. Yeah, it's that's why President Trump has said birthright citizenship has got to stop. It's right. He wrote the executive order stopping it, and I believe the Supreme Court is going to decide in his favor. Why? Because the Supreme Court doesn't really take modern opinion. They go back and look at the history, the Federalist Papers, the letters that were being written at the time, how the 14th Amendment was crafted, what did it mean, who did it apply to, And I think they're going to decide in favor of President Trump. But there's a chapter in the book called China, the Manchurian Generation. Now, I know you remember the Dustin Hoffman movie, The Manchurian Candidate. You remember that? Anyway, Peter explains how the Obama administration made Chinese birth tourism more accessible by ordering U.S. consular offices not to deny visa applications solely because they plan to travel to the United States to obtain citizenship for their child. The mother would come at 6 or 7 months. She would get a luxury condo and she would hang out until she had the baby. And then that baby would be given American citizenship, which is the anchor for the rest of the Chinese family. He made it so Chinese birth tourists did not even need to lie on their visa applications. Seriously. The change in policy also made it harder to prosecute visa fraud cases involving birth tourism. And then in November of 2014, the Obama administration made Chinese birth tourism even easier when Obama announced a 10-year reciprocal visa agreement with China. In other words, if we have a baby in China, it's a Chinese citizen. Before the agreement, visas issued to Chinese citizens to visit the United States were valid for only 1 year and required an annual interview for renewal. With the 10-year multi-entry visas, Chinese nationals could shuttle back and forth, giving birth to multiple children in the U.S. without even having a single interview. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Salvatore Babones, who pointed out that young Chinese women granted renewable 10-year U.S. multiple entry visas in the first years of the program may have had as much as 25 years of fertility ahead of them. Indeed, U.S. Customs records of interviews with birth tourists suggests that such shuttling back and forth happens all the time. In 2017, a couple traveled from China already had 2 children born in the U.S. and was now having their 3rd child to be born in the U.S. The father happened to be a Chinese military officer. According to a U.S. Senate report, having multiple anchor babies in the U.S. is relatively common. Peter also notes that while foreign nationals from other countries like Russia or Mexico have embraced birth tourism as a state-sanctioned practice, China is by far the most aggressive and organized. In fact, Chinese birth tourism, the websites actually incentivize Chinese nationals traveling to the U.S. to have children. One example Peter cites is the website asianchild.com, which lays out housing and food options for parents while they are in the U.S. and offers shopping sprees. Other companies offer highbrow services like award-winning chefs, Chinese medical consultations, as well as extensive consultations about living permanently in the U.S. Let's see. There is a company called Mifu Baby Group, a luxury baby operation based in Irvine, California. Is comprised of at least 50 properties, and nearly every single property was purchased for more than $1 million with a mortgage. Yeah. Beijing's appeal to Chinese elite encouraging U.S. birth tourism has nothing to do with American values or patriotism, I can tell you that. Birth tourism operators tout that the United States is the most attractive nationality because of the free stuff, not the freedom. U.S. citizens receive free education from junior high school to public high school, and even senior supplement benefits like Social Security, Medicare, blah, 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 when you are living overseas. In other words, go ahead and live in China. We send you the benefits while you're in China. Cash your Social Security checks while you're in China. One Chinese agency offers a primer on how the U.S. welfare system works. I'd like to know how it works. I'm retired. Another agency, it doesn't count for me. That's right. I have white privilege. I get it. Stanley May says the first restaurant on the moon is going to be Chinese takeout. Guarantee it. Guarantee it. Another agency describes how parents can apply for immigration as guardians at almost zero cost. And parents can immigrate to the United States without quota restrictions and go to California to enjoy the sunshine after retirement, as well as enjoy California's white card program for the elderly and, of course, free medical care. Right. Chinese baby tourism operators frame the practice as a legitimate business model, not fraud. Chinese officials seem to agree. Lawyer Liang Shiyi explained to a Chinese government newspaper, birth tourism is an opportunity to make money. Operators should not waste this opportunity. This could have a long-term positive impact on the United States. Bruce Lee is a child of childbirth travel. Maybe we can still find a genius. Peter also emphasizes that from a CCP perspective, Chinese elites use these services, offer no evidence that they reject the CCP, and embrace American or Western values. He points to specific examples, including a birth tourism company called Star Baby Care that has a client list including government tax officials, executives at China Telecom, Chinese Central Television, and, of course, Bank of China. USA Happy Baby, another company he writes about, reportedly has customers including people who worked for the government's radio propaganda agency and the feared Public Security Bureau. Besides the motivation of cash flow, he highlights how communist China has a long and notorious history of using mass migration as a national weapon. You don't believe me? Go to Egypt. You don't believe me? Go to Brazil. You don't believe me? Go to Portugal. Go to Spain. Go to France. Anywhere. China is using mass migration as a strategic weapon. In 1997, Great Britain began the 2-decade process of Hong Kong's transition from British to communist Chinese rule. You remember when that happened, right? It was supposed to be 99 years. Hong Kong was ruled by Britain, and China was going to come in and take it over. It was supposed to be a 20-year process. But during that process, though, Beijing, under the auspices of Chinese Communist Party, engineered an elaborate effort to have more than 83,000 Chinese with fake IDs migrate to Hong Kong. They invaded Hong Kong. And these immigrants represented 1.4% of Hong Kong's population. But even more importantly, they totaled 9.12% of the territory's voting population. Now, these fifth columnists, and I've explained to you what the fifth column is. The fifth column is when the emperor or the president of a country makes a public statement that anybody of Chinese descent or from China who happens to be living in that country must fight that country with every resource at their disposal. The fifth column, the first time we ever faced it, and it was quite devastating, was in World War II, when the Emperor of Japan ordered all Japanese people living in the United States or in U.S. territories to use every means at their disposal to destroy America. The only thing that President Roosevelt could do was to gather up all the Chinese and put them in camps. That's the only thing they could do. They were everywhere. They were everywhere. They were in business. They were in landscaping. They were in farming. They were in banking. They gathered them all up and they put them in a camp. And they kept them in the camp during the war because the Japanese could not be trusted not to follow the emperor's orders, called the fifth column. So these Chinese fifth columnists who are going to follow the orders of Xi Jinping and the Communist Chinese Party, they appear to be just, ordinary immigrants, right? They work in Chinese restaurants. They work in tailors. They work in hospitals. They work in universities and laboratories. They work everywhere you see them. They speak English. They're so kind. They're peaceful, but they're fifth columnists. They carry the Chinese government official blessing. These migrants serve as Beijing's invisible hand to steer the territory in the designed direction. That's what we're talking about. Now, what are we going to do? We can't put all Chinese nationals in a camp. We can't do that. We can't put all Syrian or all Haitian or all, of any nationality in a camp right now. It's just not politically possible. But that does not mean that the Syrians and the Palestinians and all those that are here in this country are not working a significant portion of their day every day with a constant drive toward destroying the U.S. economy and destroying America. The only way to fight it, Earth Explorers, is to not allow the immigration in the first place. And President Trump sees this coming. He knows it's a political hot button, but that's why he said, look, birth tourism makes no sense. It makes no sense for the U.S. We don't need it, and it's hurting our country, and we're going to do away with it. We shall see. We shall see. Because most of those people that are coming in, that are U.S. citizens, born in the U.S., living in another country, coming back here, they vote Democrat. And this is how the Democrats win elections. And that's what we're mostly concerned with, because as the Democrats win elections, so the nation is destroyed. Let me say that again. As the Democrats win elections, so the nation of America is destroyed. So now you know what has to be done. Interesting. Let me check Foxhole really fast. Oh, there we go. So Pool Dude, Rasta, Mad Hat, they're in here. Yeah, that's right, Mad Hat. Somalis are the modern fifth column. Well, I don't know. See, the fifth column is ordered by the leader of that country to use every resource at your disposal, no matter where you are, if you're a gardener or if you're a college professor, use every resource at your disposal to destroy America. But the Somalis don't have a leader. The Somalis are basically gypsies. They're thieves and liars, and they're connivers. That's what they did to their country. That's why their country is a shithole. And when they come here, it's exactly what they did here, is they just took advantage of the system. And a little state like Minnesota ended up getting ripped off to the tune of $18 billion. And the sad part is, it's small potatoes compared to what they did in California. They're doing it in Maine. They're doing it in Ohio. They're doing it in Wisconsin. It is a trademark. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You have to go after the fraud. You can't go after the race. You can't go after the nationality. Oh, all Somalis are. But you can go after the fraud. And by the time the jails are full or filled with all of the fraudsters, if they all happen to be Somalis, so be it. It doesn't mean you're going after Somalis. You're going after the fraud. Fraud is part of their nationality, part of their national creed. And I'll tell you, something has to be done about it, or America is going to bleed, and more ways than one. All right, so let's talk a little bit about ICE and what's going on. Over the last few days, excuse me while I take a sip of my Perrier. Over the past few days, Tom Homan has taken over the reins from Mr. Bovino. And he's made a fundamental change, and that is to come in with dual authorities. And the first authority is we're going to go after the bad guys. The guys that we have on this list, the guys that have been convicted and put in jail or prison, and now they're getting out. The guys that have had their day in court, they've had their order to remove. We're going to go in the courtroom, and we're going to go in the safety of the jail, and we're going to get these guys, and we're going to deport them. That's the first. The second is kind of what's already been happening. ICE is, of course, when the communities, and Minneapolis is just like this because of Mayor Fry, they don't turn over the criminals, the ex-cons, and those that have been given deportation orders. They don't turn them over to ICE. They release them out in the community. And so what happens is ICE goes out in the community because Tom Homan has said, we're going to arrest these guys. And that means if we know where they are, we know what their names are, we know what their fingerprints are, we know generally where they are, and we're going to go into the neighborhoods, the factories, the malls, the apartment complexes, and we're going to find them and we're going to arrest them. Now, that activity, the latter there that I just described, is exactly what the left is motivating its people to protest. 15,000 activists attended what is called the ICE Out protest in Minneapolis on Friday. Many protesters chanting ICE Out now. Of course, they're all liberal white people. There are no black people in the group. There are no Hispanics in the group, just liberal white people. New York Post found that the protests are backed and organized by leftist billionaires. Scott Waller, who's president of Capital Research and an expert of so-called dark money groups, said, my team's best judgment is that the Neville Singham network that is most active in Minnesota, partly because that's the crazy network, but they aren't alone. The outlet explained that Walter was referring to the People's Forum and the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which are both funded by China-based former software executive Singham. Both groups promoted the ICE Out protests, which were organized by another group called 50501. And I've talked to you for hours about 50501. It is that's your message on your phone. Text money to 50501. Well, that's the text network through social media. Now, what is new, though, what you may not have heard about, what is new is the extreme communist splinter groups, which are showing up alongside the American Federation for Teachers Union, Ford Foundation, actual mainstream left-wing organizations. That's the disturbing trend, is that these organized, well-funded, and very old money communist organizations are infiltrating these organizations and really adding some muscle. And by muscle, I mean steel and bullets. And that's the scary thing. Singham has reportedly become a big funder of the left-wing activist networks. I have heard that Scott Bessent is aiming at freezing all of his assets in the United States, freezing everything he has. I don't know if it's been done yet or not, because these people are being paid anywhere, I've heard, between $3,300 and $5,800 a month. And they work shifts. They're provided transportation, meals, and signs. And I believe they're provided bail money. But here's the deal. If you get arrested, if you actually touch a federal agent, you lay hands on him and they arrest you. And keep in mind, they're all going to be issued body cams now, so there's no getting out of it. It's not like, let's put body cams on them and that'll prevent the... No, it won't. The body cams will actually help the ICE agents, because when the ICE agents arrest you and take you in, he laid hands on me, or he kicked me, or he punched me, or he grabbed me and threw me off this person we were trying to arrest. There's no proof of that. It's your word against theirs, and the judge could say, well, in the heat of the moment, the fog of war, we'll let this person go. Now they'll have body cams. They'll have body cams, and here's the body cam footage. Here's the person grabbing me. Here's the person kicking me, spitting on me, throwing something at me, and it's going to be worse for the protesters. But these organized ones, these outsiders that are coming in, and they go all over. They go to all over to the different protests. They go to Wisconsin, they go to Minnesota, they go to Ohio, they go to LA. They work together through Byzantine networks of understanding, the dark money expert said. An average protester might have a dim understanding of the Neville Singham network, but he will be friends with people in several other groups. He himself probably belongs to half a dozen groups because their groups are constantly metastasizing new names. House Oversight Committee members and lawmakers in Congress are investigating if his support amounts to a foreign influence and or if his financial support violates the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which we know as FARA. And once you get investigated under FARA, that's like RICO, that's like Interpol. You're going to lose billions. You could have your assets frozen, and you could be arrested. These guys, these billionaires have two concerns. One is they want to live forever. They want to live as long as possible. And the other is they don't want to lose their money. They're so afraid of losing their money. And that doesn't stop them from thinking that, they're as powerful as a medieval king and they can order their vassals into war and they have a chance of winning. That's a serious thing that we're dealing with. I know you don't want to watch it on the news anymore. You're sick of it like I'm sick of it. You're looking forward to the Super Bowl. You're looking forward to the moon launch. Well, okay, maybe you're not looking forward to the moon launch, but I am, and I'll keep you posted. By the way, how many people are going to watch the Kid Rock halftime show? You could just roll it in this chat room. I don't think anybody's going to watch the Bad Bunny halftime show. We're going to watch the game, then we're going to tune to the Kid Rock halftime show, and then we're going to tune back to the game, right? And here's the deal. The people that have bought the advertising, they're the ones going to take the bath. We're talking like $1.5 million a minute, or maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's $4 million a minute. It's a crazy amount of money to advertise during the Super Bowl. But I'll tell you, if the game's a little slow up to the halftime, people may tune away early. And guess what's going to happen? The advertisers are going to not get the punch that they were looking for. The reason they buy that spot during the Super Bowl is because of the 40 or 50 million people that will see their commercial. That's why, you look for the commercials at the Super Bowl because they debut these great commercials. Well, nobody's going to see them because they're all going to be over at the Kid Rock show. And by the way, if you're going to put foreign bands in to play halftime, why not The Warning? Huh? Why not The Warning? The three Mexican sisters that are playing heavy metal. Have you seen them? They're really talented, really sweet, really enjoy what they're doing, and they do it in a clean way. And I'm really excited about this band called The Warning. If you get a chance to see them live in the U.S., you should go see them. Even if you've seen Lindsey Sterling or any other bands like that, you need to go see The Warning. I'm going to see them if they come close to Charlotte. Freya says, don't even plan to watch the game. What? Come on, that's America. I mean, they may cheat on some of the other games, the officials and that, and they have cheated during Super Bowl. Just ask the Seahawks. But, it's an American tradition. Now, I got to admit, I tuned away for 2 or 3 years after the whole kneeling thing. That just made me want to barf. And I'm sorry. I just couldn't go there. So, and once I stopped watching for a season and a half, I couldn't get back into it. it wasn't something I would come home on Sunday and crack open a beer and make some of my famous bean dip and sit down and watch the Super Bowl. I don't do it. I don't watch the regular games. I bet I didn't see 4 Panthers games the whole year, and even then I didn't watch the whole game. I just got out of it, and I'm not saying my life is better or worse for doing that, but I couldn't stand to watch these sissies kneel. I just couldn't do it. It was just so anti-American, and everything that has to do with sports in this country, even soccer, lacrosse, hockey, all of it is it's a place, where the recruiters come and march around with their flags, and it's rah rah America, and it's good, clean competition. It's what this country was founded on. And as soon as it went sissy, I said, that's it for me. I'm not watching. I'm not watching. I remember the first baseball game I was watching, and they all lined up on the baselines, first and third baselines, and the two teams knelt. And I said, that's it for you guys. And I just turned it off. No more baseball. No more baseball on TV. I listened on the radio because I didn't have to pay any attention to that stupid kneeling. But no more TV. You're not the only one that feels that way, Stanley Mays. I have friends, close friends, who swear the NFL is rigged. And all the games are fixed. The winner is predetermined, and it's run by the big gambling outfits. It's so disappointing. It's so disappointing to hear that. But come on, you see a game where they're on the 7-yard line or the 23-yard line, and fourth down comes, and you expect a field goal. You just expect a field goal, right? You expect them to line up and kick for the 3 points, especially when it makes the difference of winning or losing the game. If they're behind by 2 points or 1 point, they kick the field goal, they win. It happens all the time. But when a team punts on fourth down on the 23-yard line, they punt. In other words, give the ball to the other team. You just want to pull your hair out. The cheating was so in your face, and whether it was the under-over bet or the team bet or whatever it was, somebody in Vegas said, don't let them kick that field goal. If you do, we're going to lose $40 million. I'm just saying. Nobody ever punts on the 23-yard line. That's when the cheating becomes so obvious that you can't deny it. And the Panthers had a couple of games where the officials kept the Panthers from winning. And the head coach for the Panthers wrote a letter, not 1 page, but like 80 pages, and documented all of these errors that the officials made that made the Panthers lose. Probably the only coach in the entire league that did it, but it needs to be more. Somewhere along the way, the American people need to say, look, this is a game. It's a game, and we're trying to find out who is the best. Don't cheat because you've got money on the game. If you're going to lose money on the game, so what? Everybody does. Join the crowd. All right. I want to talk a little bit about electric cars because I know a little bit about electric cars. Owning an electric car company, inventing the electric pickup truck, owning the patent that allows the electric pickup truck to actually work. I have a dog in the fight. So the automotive industry's strategy for electric vehicles, it has always been bullshit. The first time I went to Washington and spoke to the Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood, in front of 400 of my fellow businessmen from North Carolina and all 18 of our congressmen, live in the congressional auditorium, I knew that they were crooked, because here's how the conversation went. I stood up, introduced myself to Secretary LaHood, and I asked a simple question. I said, I'm from North Carolina. I own an electric pickup truck company. I have applied for every single grant that was available under the Obama administration, and we got nothing. And we qualified for everything, but we got nothing. And I want to know why the government, specifically the Department of Transportation, will not allow an independent company to introduce an electric vehicle to the American highway. And he said, well, electric vehicle, why don't you just buy a GM? Just go buy a GM. That's what he said to me in front of all these people. And I said, well, with respect, Secretary LaHood, you can't buy a GM right now. You can lease them, but we've already been through that once before with the EV1, and they gathered them all up and crushed them. So we're not going to play that game again. Why not allow an independent car company to introduce an electric vehicle to the American highway if the Americans will buy it? And he said, because they made the investment. And I let that sit for a minute. All my business buddies behind me, 400 people from the state of North Carolina. And I said, well, actually, Mr. Secretary, we made the investment and we didn't get paid back. And he stood up, 6'5", stood up, faced Congress, faced the businessmen out in the audience and said, thank you very much for coming to Washington. And he left. Now, I won, but I didn't win anything. I didn't get any grants. I never got to launch my company because we couldn't get the buy-in from the federal government. Now, it may not have been the automotive industry's fault. It was sold by the left as the move that would future-proof America's and Europe's legacy automakers and save the planet while transferring billions into the pockets of the enemies of the free world. I mean, face it. That's what it was. America's auto industry created more wealth than almost anything in history. Detroit was one of the most modern and powerful cities in the world for a long, long time, for decades. Detroit led the world in everything. Up until 1912, though, 70% of vehicles were electric. And it was driven by consumer demand. They were the core of transportation from Tokyo to Chicago. Trains, buses, and cars were electric because they made sense. Back in those days, cars went 15 miles an hour. Back in those days, to start a gasoline-powered vehicle was a chore. You had to have an arm on you for one thing, and you had to be able to work that spark retard if it was cold to get it to turn over without kicking back and breaking your arm while you were trying to start it. Cars were very loud. There were no mufflers then. Roads were shit. They were dirt or gravel, mostly made for horses, right? So what happened? And by the way, women did not drive cars. For two reasons. One is you had to hand crank the damn thing from the front, which was dangerous and took a man's arm to make happen. And the second is women wore dresses. They wore dresses. And the way the cars drove, it had a cylinder that was on the side of the motor. And when you started, the cylinder would turn, like spin, like a spindle. And then you had a fabric belt. You know what I'm talking about if you drive a riding lawnmower, don't you? Well, you would tighten the belt against that cylinder and the car would lurch forward. And then you would just simply speed up the motor if you wanted to go faster. You pushed in the clutch, loosening the fabric belt, and pressed on the brakes to stop. That's how it was done. But if your dress got caught in that cylinder and that belt, it'd rip it right off your body. There were no safeties in those days. Nothing like that. Nothing like that. But electric, and they were loud, and they were smelly and dirty and greasy. Women didn't want to drive them. What did they want to drive? They wanted to drive something quiet. They were called hummingbirds. And they used Xi batteries, lead acid batteries, which would take you about 20 miles, which was plenty of distance for those days. Plenty of distance. You could ride all over town and charge up almost anywhere. Hell, you can still plug in your car. Anywhere in those northern states, you can plug in your car. It's an oil heater, but you could plug in your electric car at the same plug and charge up the batteries. 144 volts, which was straight line voltage, by the way. And the cars were popular, and many car companies made them. All the buses were electric, and they stayed electric for 30 years. Yeah, they had wire runners that went along the streets, and the buses would run on those, and you could see them sparking as they went from intersection to intersection, but they were electric. Trains are still electric. To this day, they're electric. They run a diesel engine to turn the generator, but the train itself is electric. It's called the diesel electric. Electric vehicles work where they make sense. But what the left tried to do is push the electric vehicle into places it had no business being. Electric vehicles had no business being on the freeway traveling 200 miles between cities. That's a ridiculous application of an electric vehicle, but that's where they went. That's where they went. And Ford, General Motors, Stellantis, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, they have collectively burned through a staggering $114 billion on EV ventures between 2022 and 2025, according to an analysis by Robert Bryce. And I introduced the electric truck that made sense and worked the way customers wanted it to work. But the auto industry was not allowed to use it. The EPA forced EVs to perform just like gas-powered vehicles, with emissions tests and everything up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And believe me, I went up there and sat down with them and say, I want you to explain to me your emissions test for EVs. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. I got the guy that designed the test that the auto industry had to meet. I said, why are you doing that? It's pure mathematics. You don't have to have these 18 indices on a sticker on the window. All you need to know is the vehicle's weight, the voltage and horsepower of the motor, and that's it. Everything else can be calculated. There are no emissions to the vehicle. Why is the EPA even involved in electric vehicles? Hell, and that's what I told the guy, we make a toaster with wheels. Why are you guys even involved? They were involved because it wasn't about getting the electric vehicle on the road. It was about bleeding money from the car companies. Yes, it was. Ford, Lucid, Rivian, they all lost their asses. I mean, who wants a Rivian for Christ? I see them around town. Who wants one? In 5 years, all of them, including the Teslas, all of them are going to be in the junkyard in 5 years. I drive a 2016 Ford F-150. It's 10 years old. It has 269,000 miles on it, and it drives better than it did when it was new because I've replaced the shocks and I've replaced the brakes with upgraded brakes. Better than new, 269,000 miles. You will never, ever get 269,000 miles on an electric vehicle. It will not happen. Between 2022 and the third quarter of 2025, legacy automakers alone are estimated to have lost roughly $83.6 billion on EV programs, including major write-downs at Ford and GM. Again, Mr. Ray LaHood, who I had the discussion with live in person. EV-only startups, Lucid and Rivian, account for another $30 billion in red ink, with total losses across 7 automakers approaching $114 billion, including Volkswagen, the largest car maker in the world. They gave up. They gave up because they were trying to apply the electric vehicle in the wrong space against gas-powered vehicles. Legacy automakers poured tens of billions of dollars. They were forced to do it into factories and battery deals and all-electric lineups, often under intense regulatory pressure. and incentive schemes under the Biden administration that were premised on rapid mass adoption that never materialized. Only 2% of the country expressed a desire to even own an electric vehicle. I wasn't focusing on the consumer. I was focusing on the municipalities. Municipalities operate between 100 and 10,000 vehicles, most of them pickup trucks. Yeah, between 100 and 10,000. It depends on the size of the city. San Marcos operated 10,000 vehicles. My vehicles would go just as far and do the same work and cost 2 cents a mile instead of 25 cents a mile. Big difference. But we're not talking about freeway driving here. We're talking about parks and recreation. We're talking about airports. We're talking about city cleanup and city maintenance. Those are not good applications for a gas-powered pickup truck, but they were perfect for mine. Perfect. Never got off the ground. Never got the first dime in investment money here in the U.S. But in the U.S., EV sales briefly spiked in quarter three of 2025 as buyers rushed to capture the $7,500 federal income tax credit before it expired. Yeah, and that incentive-driven surge pushed quarterly sales above 437,000 units and lifted the EV market share to 10.5%, which was completely artificial, completely. And by the way, not everyone can use a $7,500 tax credit. Not all car buyers can use a $7,500 tax credit. They don't make enough money. They don't make enough money. And once the subsidy disappeared, and by the way, my trucks didn't even need the subsidy to compete. Once the subsidy disappeared, the demand evaporated. Quarter four sales fell to roughly 234,000 vehicles. Most of those were Teslas. 46% drop from quarter three. And that wasn't the bad part. The bad part was what the Kelley Blue Book, that's the book that decides what your used vehicle is worth. Once the Kelley Blue Book started publishing what used electric vehicles were selling for, it was a complete disaster. Complete disaster. Aggressive emissions mandates rammed through by climate-obsessed bureaucrats collided with weakening demand and an onslaught of lower-cost Chinese competitors. In 2025, China's BYD, which can't really sell in the U.S., overtook Tesla as the world's largest EV seller. And you should see the junkyards. The junkyards are bigger than any junkyard I've ever seen, and I've been to San Jose. Yeah, San Jose had miles of junkyards. Nothing compares to BYD's junkyards. Volkswagen canceled its program. Mercedes canceled its program. Jaguar canceled its program. US-bound EQ models and others quietly extended the life of the internal combustion and hybrid platforms while lobbying for regulatory relief, which was hard to come by because this was driven from the top. It was driven by Obama. It was driven by Biden. And you'll recall one of the reasons that people switched to electric vehicles is because gas was costing them $7.50 a gallon. In Europe, it was over $11 a gallon for gasoline. $11 a gallon. No way people could afford it. No way. Even in California, gas today is still like $6.50 a gallon. I think I saw it $2.39 the other day here in North Carolina. $2.35 actually. And I can actually afford to drive my pickup truck at those prices, even on a fixed income. The internal combustion is here to stay. Don't you ever worry about that. It's never going to go away. Now, we may modify the fuel, but there are a lot of things that will make a V8 roar. It doesn't have to be gas. It can be alcohol, straight alcohol, which is, by the way, organic. I don't recommend it because eventually your engine will corrode because alcohol is hygroscopic. it doesn't lubricate your engine very well at all. You have to have some other additives in order to keep it from chewing itself to pieces. But I'm just saying, internal combustion doesn't have to be gas. It can be methanol. Diesel engines can run on used transmission oil, can run on vegetable oil. Yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff that you don't have to have diesel fuel or petroleum in order to drive an internal combustion engine. All right, we got about 2 minutes to the break. Let me check my chat room again really quick. Yeah. Yeah, there's a graveyard in Tucson that's impressive. I mean, come on, we built $25,000 race car engines or street rod engines, and we would make regular trips to the dump. And we would go look for good blocks and heads. And then, of course, we'd remachine them and put improved parts and cams and everything like that, and then would get 400, 500, 600 horsepower out of them. People bought them by the crate. And it kept the shop busy for years and years and years. And in fact, right outside this window behind me, there is an RX-7. And we're going to pull the rotary engine out of that, and we're going to put an LS engine in that. And it's going to be fun to drive. And that's the whole idea. Mash the motor and squeeze yourself into that seat. What is it? Freya says, car industry and government screwed over an opportunity to switch our fleets. EVs could have benefited if the incentives would have covered in the concert. LNG, liquid natural gas. It's true. And compressed natural gas fueled vehicles. That's true. I don't know if we're working toward helium in vehicles, but I'll explain that in just a second. Compressed natural gas, yes, there's a lot of energy in methane and no pollution. The trouble is that the CNG stations are not very plentiful. I invented a CNG electric river barge that carried containers from St. Louis, Missouri to New Orleans. Very fast, very maneuverable. You don't have to use a barge ship, but you could take 10,000 trucks a year off the road with a CNG electric river barge. I invented it. I still have all the drawings if you're interested in talking to me about it. I mean, a fleet of 10 or 12 of these things could make so much money up and down the river, and you don't have all the barge accidents. It's a big winner. And the CNG stations are already along the river, right where you want them to be. So it makes a lot of sense for the industry. Talk to me about it if you want to. Look at my whole designs. I promise it'll blow your mind. Okay, let's take a quick break for about 3 minutes, and we'll be right back. Don't go away. More America Free Radio right after this. Okay, so just hang out a little bit and stay with us. I want to make sure. Hang on a second. I'm going to make sure that you guys can hear me and hear the break music. Okay.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Tune in to the Family Industrial Complex podcast here on Revolution Radio, Studio B, every Wednesday, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Get fit, empowered, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
The rooster has crowed out the opening bars of a new day. You've dragged yourself out of bed. You turn on your device. You want to know what's going on in the world. But you're hungry for a topical show that serves up those breakfast headlines just that little bit differently. Do you like your early morning news the way you like your eggs over easy? Served with slathers of salsa-like sass? Do you like those first headlines of the day to deliver a punch as powerful as that first cup of joe? Join Mitchell Bupp at his breakfast table for Revolution in the Morning, where he will digest, dissect, and dismantle those new day's national and global news headlines with razor-sharp relish. Find Mitchell here at revolution.radio every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday morning, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Studio B.
Through everything, we have to remember that we have more in common than not in common. And to find this common ground, tune in to Conversations with Eagle Flower, Wednesdays, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio A. Because we come to this table of life to learn in the best possible way and experience this gift of life from our mutual Creator. So let's learn together and build our best future with Conversations with Eagle Flower, Wednesdays, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Studio A on Revolution Radio.
I will defend myself against their tyranny. Number 3 is my radio broadcast. I'm squarely in front of the public all the time, and they all know what's going on.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
Hello, my name is John Wayne, and I do a broadcast here at freedomslips.com, revolution.radio, called The Unequivocal Truth, DEFCON 1.
Freedom and fear are at war.
And folks, I assure you, we are in Defense Mission 1, as we journey perilously through this paradigm that we currently reside in. And I ask that you join me every Saturday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for The Unequivocal Truth, DEFCON 1.
We shall never surrender.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of this program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Thanks for hanging in there while we took that short break. Now back to America Free Radio with host Brooks Agnew here at Revolution Radio.
Thank you so much, Revolution Radio, for that great station identification. We love your board. You guys do a great job. fantastic job. Those of you that are among the 4 million listeners to the world's largest listener-supported network, pay close attention. You're listening by audio through TalkStream Live, Orange Radio, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio. It's all over, everywhere. Listen closely because we're going to go to my website. My website is brooksagnew.com, brooksagnew.com. Those of you watching by video, it's super simple. We're just going to click on this button and take me straight to the website, which is brooksagnew.com, brooksagnew.com. You'll know you're there because my picture's on the front. It says, I'm Brooks Agnew. It's easy enough. There are 2 blue buttons on the cover. One says, get my free newsletter. That's pretty self-explanatory. It's free, which means they don't cost nothing. And the other is Ivan and fenbendazole without a prescription. We'll click on that really quick because I want to show you how easy it is to get Ivan and fenbendazole for yourself with no prescription. All you have to do is click the Buy Now button right here. Very simple, and you can get that for yourself, and you can also get this for yourself without a prescription. That's pretty powerful stuff. And you know what it already does. You don't know where to get it. Tell your friends. Your friends will tell you because my listener base is not that large, but if I can get that to, all right, we'll just, I don't know why that pop-up comes up. But I'm also adding this handbook for you all. This is fenbendazole and ivermectin protocols. It's a practical handbook. I thought it was very good. A lot of you asked me questions. Well, what do I do now that I have it? You know, I have this or I have that application. You want answers. You don't want the runaround. These are the protocols. You can click this and get the handbook. I make no money on it. I'm just providing you the link. Don't forget about True Niagen. You can add years and years to your life, good quality years, stop aging, get your telomeres and your NAD levels back up in your body, and you're going to feel great. You're going to look great. Everybody's going to notice. Make sure that you take zinc along with these wonderful products because it preps your cell wall to be able to use the product at its best. Okay, that's it. I have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to cancel that out. And so one of you asked the question about helium as a fuel. And so I thought I would dig into my presentation on asteroid mining, and this is actually the helium fusion reaction. So what we're talking about is taking 2 helium-3 ions, which we can find in large supply on the moon. We don't get too much here on this planet. You have to go around a volcano to get it. But we fuse these together to make helium-4. That's the stuff that you fill your party balloons with. You get energy, which is heat, which you can use to boil water, make steam, turn a turbine, and make energy, make electricity. And you get 2 energetic protons, not neutrons. Protons, which is the same as electricity. You can use this to induce electricity. And this is put into what's called a tokamak reactor, which looks a little bit like this. As close a picture as I could get. It has a magnetic field that suspends the plasma and creates the fusion. Of course, this is a big one. And what we really want to do is put it into this, which is a fusion rocket. Now, this fusion rocket can direct that stream out the back and create fusion rocketry so that we can move ships quicker into space. We can reduce the amount of time it takes to get to Mars from 7 months to about 70 days. Of course, first we have to get to the moon, and this is where we're going. The lava tubes on the moon. And yes, there are lots of them. Once we develop those, and what do they look like? Well, they look a little bit, hold on a second. They look a little bit like this. Now, these are small ones that we have here on Earth. These are lava tubes that are here on Earth, well shielded by lots of rock and earth from solar flares. But on the moon, they're much, much bigger. In fact, you could put a city, these are the ones on Earth, and this is what we expect to find on the moon. Large enough, one of them is large enough to put the city of Philadelphia in. Once we learn to do that, now you've created a habitat and you've created a lunar colony, and we can make things happen from there. Okay, I just wanted to show you that. It's just something that is interesting. Oh, there I went and did it. I hit the wrong X. How about that? Well, just give me a second to fix that. Let's go back to here. All right, we're good. Hold on one second. I hit the wrong letter. Okay, now we're good to go. Now I can slide that back up there, and we're in good shape. It's nice to have 3 screens, but it's not nice if you don't know what you're doing, which I don't sometimes. So that explains your helium that you were talking about, Freyas. I have a whole presentation on that, but if you really want to know about it, get my book, Asteroid Mining, The Future of Energy. All right, let's talk a little bit about the World Health Organization. I know, we just pulled out of it, and of course they have the sequel ready to release. You remember the first World Health Organization presentation, don't you? What they did is they took a flu and they turned it into a pandemic and shut the whole damn world down. That was the World Health Organization. Well, in December, just a little bit ago, they were quietly coordinating a large-scale pandemic simulation. It involved 31 countries and areas and was framed by the World Health Organization itself as getting ready for the next pandemic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you think, oh yeah, we'll fall for that again. Listen, folks, Earth explorers, it's important that you realize they're still out there. They're still out there. I still see them at the grocery. I see them driving down the highway wearing a mask. I shit you not. There are people out there that are waiting for the next pandemic. They never threw their masks away. They're all boosted up and they're all ready to go. They're all ready to socially distance and shut down their businesses again. I'm not kidding. And this phrase, of course, is not complimentary, right? It was the official title and purpose of the exercise. The World Health Organization publicized the exercise on Facebook. And here's what they said. Getting ready for the next pandemic, 31 countries and areas from across the Western Pacific participated in IHR exercise Crystal to test their readiness for future health emergencies. Not kidding. Officials are planning this. These simulations offer a much-needed opportunity to evaluate, refine, and iron out coordination challenges and practice teamwork before a real crisis hits. Yeah, they got it all going again. Well, I can tell you, we here at America Free Radio, we will never forget, and we will never forgive what they did. And we are never shutting down, and we're never wearing a mask, and we're never socially distancing. Why? Because I am the cure. I am the cure. If you end up with the flu and you suffer from it for 2 or 3 weeks, you're a dumbass. I'm just telling you, you're a dumbass. The cure is here. All you have to do is have it in your medicine cabinet. The flu goes around. It goes around every year. And you know what? I haven't had it in 5 years. You know why? Because I have Ivan, Roxy, and fenbendazole in my house. That's why. Winter says the event took place over several weeks in December and simulated the emergence of a novel respiratory illness, with the potential for international spread. Participating governments were not asked to discuss theory. They were asked to respond in real time to alerts, verify information, conduct risk assessments, and coordinate actions across agencies. In other words, shut your damn gymnasium down. Shut your restaurant down. Shut your movie theater down. Close your church. The description proffered by the World Health Organization stressed crystal was planned to examine how nations would operate during an emerging outbreak, not afterward. Officials highlighted real-time information sharing, multi-sectoral coordination, and decision-making under pressure. The framing is notable. World Health Organization did not describe the drill as preparation for a hypothetical scenario. It repeatedly referred to readiness for the next pandemic. Well, there never was a pandemic. The last pandemic we had was in 1918, and that was man-made. Yes, it was man-made. Yes, the 1918 Spanish flu. You remember that? Do you remember that? Do you know where it came from? Do you know who spread it? We did. We did. What we did is we inoculated hundreds of thousands of American troops. And then we sent them into trenches in foreign countries where they had no protection against that flu. Our soldiers transferred the flu to them, and they died. They contracted it, and some of them died within 2 days of contracting the flu. That's how unready they were for it. It was spread by the vaccine. It was spread by the vaccine. That's what did the 1918. And we didn't learn a damn thing. And when the flu showed up in 2019, 2020 was the perfect year to try to take down the Trump presidency because the presidency was just doing too damn good. And it wasn't any way that the Democrats could beat the Trump economy. It was roaring, and we were looking forward to the roaring 20s. All of us were. You were making money. I was making money. Everybody was making money. All over the world, the Trump economy was blazing. And the only way to shut it down was through this fake pandemic. They took an ordinary flu, they took all those numbers and stuffed it into the pandemic model and shut down the whole damn world, except for South Dakota, which, by the way, was run by Kristi Noem. Her state survived because she didn't shut down anything. No mask mandates, no social distancing, no businesses closed. Everything stayed open in South Dakota. And they didn't have any more death than anybody else did. All right. There you go, K.O. Kelly. My dad's uncle died of the Spanish flu in France. That's correct. Our soldiers went to France, jumped in a ditch with people who had no defense against it. And we transferred the Spanish flu from our troops to those people and killed them. All right. So now we know why I've not been back to the moon in 50 years. NASA was forced to end a critical fueling test of its giant Artemis 2 rocket in the wee hours of the morning yesterday. It's going to delay the mission probably a month, I'm thinking. And now that a new day has dawned on the Big Orange launch vehicle, the space agency is attempting to shed some light on what exactly went wrong. The fueling test for NASA's Artemis 2 space launch system rocket began late Saturday, January 31st, and ran until Tuesday morning, called a wet dress rehearsal. This is where they actually put fuel in and check for leaks. The simulation countdown clock went fully power on and fuel the rocket with more than 700,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. Yeah, they're going to make water. We call it boom gas in the business. Tanking operations began smoothly after mission managers polled go to begin procedures, but hydrogen leaks detected at the SLS tail service mast. Umbilical quick disconnect on the launch platform put technicians into a troubleshooting mode most of the afternoon. Hydrogen is very hard to contain. That I'll give you. It's just one proton, little bitty single proton hydrogen. Oxygen is much larger, of course, O2 being, so it's 16 grams per mole. Hydrogen is 1 gram per mole. But hydrogen is very hard to stop. That's why Elon Musk went to methane. Methane is 18 molecular weight. A lot easier to handle. Let's see here. Artemis 1 had a hydrogen leak in, by the way, the same exact location in its wet dress rehearsal. That was 3 years ago. Artemis 1 launched in November of 2022. It flew an uncrewed, well, they say uncrewed. It had stuffed animals in it, okay? It had Snoopy and some other stuffed animals in it that were loaded down with sensors to detect any kind of radiation that they would be exposed to going through the Van Allen radiation belts. But it went on a month-long mission to lunar orbit and back. Artemis 2 is going to do the same route a little bit further, 40,000 miles beyond the moon, but it's a 10-day mission, and it's not going to land on the moon. They learned a lot from the Artemis 1 mission. They implemented a lot of lessons learned through the wet dress, but they didn't learn that one. All right, let's see here. NASA's Artemis 2 Space Launch System moon rocket is enormous. Despite the hours of troubleshooting, the persistent hydrogen leak, which NASA officials say was stabilized within acceptable limits, but it was never eliminated. And that's the last thing you want is a hydrogen leak. Mission operators managed to fully fuel both SLS stages and carry the test down to the simulated clock's terminal count, which is the last 10 minutes before takeoff, and then they stop the count. The fact that we got to full tanking yesterday on the first day was a tremendous success, and we gathered an enormous amount of data in the processes and how we want to go forward with that in the future, which hopefully will be no more than a month. At T-minus 5 minutes, 15 seconds, the SLS launch ground launch sequencer terminated the count due to a spike in the same quick disconnect hydrogen leak it had experienced all afternoon. As we began that pressurization, we did see that the leak within the cavity came up pretty quick. Let's see here. We got into our safety steps. We saw the hydrogen concentration come down, and then later in the evening, we got into our drain operation. While maintaining the wet dress rehearsal and overall success in terms of data gathered and the accolade of filling SLS's tanks on the first try, Blackwell Thompson, who also assured that unlike Artemis 1, the hydrogen hiccups can likely be addressed at the pad and don't seem to warrant a rollback to the VAB for maintenance. They don't have to go all the way back to the building, in other words. And during Artemis 1, we found that we can do some work on these plates at the pad. We had hoped that we would not have to demonstrate that again for Artemis 2, but we showed that we can do this work at the pad and be ready for launch. And I hope that they're able to do that. It's tremendously complex, by the way, all of the hookups and connections and elbows and fittings and everything that are all had to be replaced for every single launch, because the shock of the rockets and the boosters going by all this stuff as it's dangling after quick disconnects ruins them, and you have to start all over again. So it's very complex, and everything has to be checked and double-checked, and that's why they didn't go forward. A leaky seal could possibly be a result of vibrations incurred during the rocket's initial rollout to the pad. It took the Artemis 2 rocket 12 hours to make the 4-mile trip to the pad from the VAB at top speed of 1 mile per hour last month. That's slower than I want to walk for sure. Get on a treadmill sometime and set it on 1 mile per hour. No, it's really slow. And that rollout environment is very complicated. Let's see. We think that that's a contributor, but again, we have to tear the seal apart and see what happened. This is the first time this particular machine has borne witness to cryogens, and how it breathes and how it vents and how it wants to leak is something we have to characterize. Cryogens, liquid hydrogen is somewhere around minus 230, right? Minus 230, minus 220 degrees Fahrenheit. And that puts a specific, well, I'm sure you've sensed this before. If you've ever filled a lighter with butane, okay, butane is 4 carbons. And you notice when it leaks, when it overflows, the gas is very cold, right, to your hands. Like it's, whoa, cold. It will freeze your hands. Liquid hydrogen is way colder than that, way colder than that. It will not liquefy at the same pressures that butane liquefies. Even with an aggressive approach to dealing with hydrogen leaks during Artemis 1, we're pretty limited as to how much realism we can put into the test. We try to test like we fly, but this interface is a very complex interface, and when you're dealing with hydrogen, it's the smallest molecule there is. The smallest molecule is a single proton. It is highly energetic. If it sparks with something, it will form water or it will form some acid, but the conversion is exothermic. That is to say, it explodes. If you take a balloon, just a simple balloon, it has no pressure to it at all, and you fill it with hydrogen and oxygen, just hydrogen and oxygen, under whatever pressure that balloon puts on it, which is not much. Just blow the balloon up with hydrogen and oxygen and tie it off. And then put a rag at the bottom of it and douse it a little bit in gasoline so it'll light up. Lay it on the ground and light that rag and run. And the explosion that happens when that balloon full of gas combines to make water will rattle the windows. Not kidding. There's a lot of energy in hydrogen. NASA needs to evaluate the rocket and ground infrastructure at the pad before determining the next possible date for another wet rehearsal. With more than 3 years between SLS launches, we fully anticipate encountering challenges. That is precisely why we conduct a wet dress rehearsal. These tests are designed to surface issues before flight and set up launch day with the highest probability of success. And the mission managers, these are guys with a lot of experience on the pad. The mission managers are now targeting next month's window, which is open March 6th through 9th and March 11th, with about 5 days available around the first week of each month thereafter. That's when the moon is in the right trajectory, where the right trajectory leaving Earth's orbit and going to the moon will match up. All right. Wow. That was a lot of talking for that program. No one has told me that. Hang on one second. Let me get that back up. It probably happened when I hit the wrong X, right? Give me a second here. I'll get back on Revolution Radio. Okay, there we are. And we're in. Okay, now we're back live on Revolution Radio audio. There we go. Okay, let's continue on here. So You heard the announcement that in Minnesota, ICE is going to draw down. Relax a little bit. That's no victory for Mayor Fry or anything else like that. President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, has announced the drawdown of several hundred federal agents from Minnesota after the administration secured a cooperation agreement. This is what the media is not telling you. What they are telling you is that Homan is retreating. Homan's pulling several hundred troops out. That's what the media is telling you. What I'm telling you here on America Free Radio is that's because there's been a cooperation agreement. So, and this is between the ICE agents and the jails. So he said, I've had productive discussions with state and local officials, including the governor, the attorney general, Mayor Fry, and law enforcement officials about increasing coordination in a lawful way between the county jails and ICE. And what this basically calls for is that the jails are going to hold on to the criminals that are being released after they've served their time or paroled until ICE agents can get to the jail. And so in the safety and security of the jail, the ICE agents are going to put the cuffs on and deport these individuals. That's also happening at the prisons. It's happening at the county jails and prisons. And that means that ICE agents do not have to chase these guys down in the neighborhood. They know what they look like. They know their names. They have their fingerprints. They know the crimes that they've committed, and they generally know where they are. But when the state or the city releases them out into the community, not communicating with ICE, ICE has to go into that community to find that individual. And that is where the escalation occurs. Once they show up in the neighborhood, then the people with the whistles and the organized protesters show up to block ICE, and then the conflict occurs. And of course, what Singham wants and what Fry wants and what Walz wants is they want people to die. Once people engage with ICE, if ICE has to turn on them and shoot them in the eye or with a pepper ball or gas them in any way or break a rib or whatever, that's exactly what they want. They want the public to go in and get its ass kicked and get that on camera because there's one running every 3 feet on the street. And once that hits social media, that gives them the fuel then to stop the Trump administration from doing what it's doing. Well, what is it doing? What is it doing? I'm glad you asked that question. The Trump administration is deporting Democrat voters. That's what it boils down to. Fry, Walz, Oprah, none of these people care at all about illegals in this country. They don't give a shit about them. They don't care if they work, don't work, welfare, no welfare. They don't care. What they care about is their voting. If they vote, everything's cool. As long as they'll get down and vote Democrat, they're happy. Well, the Trump administration has deported over 800,000 registered Democrats. Wow, do the numbers, guys. 800,000 registered Democrats. They're gone. They're back in their home countries. And there's way more to go. Way more to go. Millions more. And guess what? That's where ICE is going. Now, when you are running a party that must have illegals voting in the election in order to give you the base, well, it gives you the base two ways. First, it gives you the base in the number of congressmen because they count on the census. They count on the population, right? So you get an extra congressman for that representation, right? And the second is that they count on the vote. So if you get a person, a group voting 30, 40, 50, 200,000 in Chicago, it's 100,000. In Boston, it's over 100,000 illegals that are voting in the election. You could swing the election to the Democrats. And guess what? That's exactly what they did. Exactly what they did. But now ICE is in there deporting them. Yeah, I just said that to Tonka Dave. Illegal aliens are not only voting, but they were on the 2020 census. It's not 2030 yet, but they were on the 2020 census. I have a friend who, well, was lucky, was working the census. She's worked it several times before. And one of the questions that they've been able to ask in the past is, okay, how many people are living in this house? Okay, there's 7. And the next question is, how many are U.S. citizens? Well, they were forbidden from asking that question this time. They were forbidden from asking, are they U.S. citizens? You just have to count the number of people in the household. And that's how states were getting the number of congressmen that they were allowed to have, or they were allocated by the formula. Well, with 800,000 of them gone, now it's going to change. So in 2030, that's going to change. And Trump wants to have another census done before then. He wants to have a census done before 2030. So the Trump administration urged Governor Walz and Mayor Fry to allow ICE to swiftly take custody of the criminal aliens while they're in the local custody, rather than having local law enforcement go out in the neighborhoods, in the communities, and try to find them. That's where the conflict is occurring. And that agreement was made. So Minnesota jails and prisons refused to turn over some 823 illegal aliens over to ICE. They had to go out in the neighborhoods and arrest them. And for this period, Minnesota was among the top 10 states releasing illegal aliens from jail rather than turning them over to ICE agents. If you take all 10 and you say 823 is the average, you're talking about 8,000 criminals that made their way into the subdivisions and into the grocery stores and malls and factories and auto shops and construction sites, and they had to go get arrested on location. Now, the reason you don't hear about this in other states, even Louisiana, is because ICE goes into the jails and picks these people up. They go into the courtrooms and pick these people up. In fact, we just had a judge convicted, and I don't know how much time she's got to serve, but she was just convicted because she told ICE to get the hell out of her courtroom, and then she took the illegal, which, by the way, had just had a removal order issued because their asylum was turned down. She took that illegal out a side entrance, and they were able to escape the ICE apprehension for a while. ICE had to chase them down outside. Now, here's where it gets dangerous. Once they're outside the courtroom, they have access to weapons. When they're in the courtroom, nobody's got weapons. Everybody goes through a metal detector. Everybody's checked. Everybody's safe. That's why ICE wants to pick them up in the courtroom. When the removal order comes, they turn around, the cuffs go on, they get on the bus, and a week later, they're back in their home country. But once they get outside, they got access to a gun. They have access to a knife. They have access to other people who are going to line up and help them. And how many famous people have we had come forward lately and say, we need to start shooting ICE agents? How many? I can't count them on 2 hands. It's been more than that. What did Billie Eilish say at the Grammys? Fuck ICE. Nobody's illegal on stolen land. Do you know who Billie Eilish's fan base is? 12-year-old girls. 10 to 12-year-old girls. That's her fan base. That's what makes up her audience. Do you think the parents that drove their kids to that concert are going to let them go to another Billie Eilish concert? I don't think so. Billie Eilish has gotten so much money now off these 12-year-old girls and her albums and merch. And she thinks she's all that. So now she lives in a $15 million mansion with gates and walls and security cameras around it. And guess what? It's on Indian land. It's on stolen land. Yeah, so Billie Eilish has got a big problem on her hands. Yes, that's right, Tatanka Dave. Superman was an illegal alien. Right, from Kansas. Absolutely correct. But unfortunately, nobody could deport him because we didn't know where his home planet was. Why? Oh, because it was destroyed. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So he was an illegal alien, but Superman was a refugee. Superman was a refugee and he was granted asylum. And he grew up in Kansas. So give me a break. By the way, Superman is kind of odd for superheroes. How so? Well, okay. All the other superheroes had to put on their costume or their paraphernalia in order to be the superhero, right? Right? Yeah. Well, Superman put on the costume to be Clark Kent. Superman put on the costume to be the ordinary kid reporter. He didn't put on the uniform to be Superman. He was already Superman. That's what makes him very needed about now. And I don't think Superman was ever a felon. Well, maybe he was. I think in one of the comics. Yeah. But even in the movie, Man of Steel. All right. Somebody asked the question of me while I was writing the book, Asteroid Mining, the Future of Energy. If it was possible to nuke an asteroid that might be a near-Earth object or a particularly hazardous object, a PHO. I don't know, Tatanka Dave. Batman is an anomaly to me. He's an ordinary guy, but he's like he told Flash in the one movie when he was asked, "What's your superpower?" He said, "I'm rich," and that was basically it, right? So he had his high-tech gadgetry to try to even the playing field, and he had an inner rage that he was dealing with too. That's why the Batman movies are all dark, because Batman's a dark individual, right? He's fighting this loss of his family from the Joker. You want the Batmobile? I've seen the Batmobile before. It's kind of cool. So could humanity actually nuke an incoming asteroid to deflect it and save Earth? There's lots of movies been made on it. Remember, what was it, Asteroid or Deep Impact, and the other one was Armageddon. By the way, if you they're two completely different directors, right? Michael Bay and what's her name? I can't remember her name that made Deep Impact. Which movie did you like better? Okay, yes, Armageddon had bigger stars. It had Bruce Willis and all that stuff, but Armageddon was more corny, I thought. Landing on the asteroid with those drilling. That was all, I don't know. Deep Impact made, Robert Duvall and all, and Morgan Freeman. To me, it was more real. Like, what would it actually be like? What would individual like the vice president having to resign and get on his boat and disappear because of ELE, and the reporter called it L and thought it was an affair, and he just told her to go speak to the president, which she did. But I actually thought that Deep Impact was the better, more real movie, right? It was kind of based on a book by Larry Purnell, or Jerry Purnell, Larry Purnell. Anyway, Purnell, and it was called Lucifer's Hammer. Anybody ever read that book? Yes? No? Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell wrote this book called Lucifer's Hammer. And the storyline up to the time of the asteroid impact, which is actually early in the book, it's about this thick. You should read it. You can find it at a used bookstore for $1. I mean, it's a great read. Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell. It's called Lucifer's Hammer. But up until the point of the asteroid impact, Deep Impact actually follows the storyline, even to the names, Biddleman. It follows the storyline. After the impact, which is the bulk of the book of Lucifer's Hammer, is a much more interesting, drawn-out story. But I thought Deep Impact was more credible as far as the storyline. I mean, movies have to have some kind of unsolvable problem, some villain that needs to be overcome or some problem that needs to be solved. And I thought Armageddon was corny. It was just corny. But Deep Impact was realistic, I thought. So it was a better movie for me. Maybe not as good at music and didn't have Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis in it, but I thought it was a better movie. So researchers have recently found that space rocks can withstand a lot more stress than previously inferred from experiments and observations. I mean, they're solid metal, a lot of them. Counterintuitively, asteroids actually grow stronger when subjected to an intense impact. Now, it might sound a little discouraging because we've had a couple of good movies to go through. Of course, those were comets, actually. But this discovery can improve planetary defense strategies because it suggests that a nuked asteroid will remain intact rather than fragmenting into mini space rocks that would eventually rain down across our planet and possibly burn up in the atmosphere. But a team of researchers, including physicists from the University of Oxford, participated in the Outer Solar System Company, a nuclear deflection startup, to analyze what happens to an iron space rock under different levels of stress. And these analyses are intended to examine changes in the meteorite's internal structure caused by the radiation and to confirm at a microscopic level the increase in material strength by a factor of 2.5 indicated by the experimental results. Now, the experimental setup is displayed in their programs. And, like the DART mission, and you remember the DART mission, right? That was back in 2022. One promising way to avert an asteroid-induced apocalypse is just to deflect the incoming threat with a kinetic impactor, just some heavy rocket or piece of metal that we're going to slam into it like a battering ram, right? We're not going to blow it up. We're just going to bump it out there, way out there, alter its course 1/10 of a degree, enough to miss Earth. Now, conceptually, it's very simple, but the reality is fraught with perilous uncertainties. A hit in the wrong spot may only delay an asteroid's doomsday approach. Furthermore, an impactor's energy and the asteroid's material response can lead to unexpected consequences like fragmentation or a surprising shift in momentum. So, to decide between an impactor like DART or an as yet untried nuclear approach, planetary defenders must ascertain the mechanical behavior of different asteroid materials. And this knowledge is essential to transfer energy to said asteroid and redirect its trajectory away from Earth. Of course, now the advantage is to get it as early as possible, not like 2 days away, but like 7 months from Earth. That'd be the smart thing to do, right? Now, these models may differ up to a factor of 7, depending on whether they test for local microscopic or bulk macroscopic. Additionally, the destructive nature of previous tests precluded direct measurement of material responses as they occurred. So researchers employed a unique technique to ensure that they didn't destroy the evidence. They used the superproton cyclotron particle accelerator at CERN's High Radiation to Materials facility. This is in Geneva, Switzerland. I've been there. I have plenty of pictures of the place. I'm going to include it in my presentation, Asteroid Mining, the Future of Energy. If any of you get a chance to see it this year out there when I'm on tour, I may turn it into a webinar or something and offer it for a couple bucks. I don't know. We'll see. If you're interested, write me in the contact at my website at brooksagnew.com and say, hey, I'd like to see the presentation. Anyway, temperature sensors and laser Doppler vibrometry. It's a technique to analyze surface vibrations. And they use lasers to do this, called laser interferometry, if you really want to know the instrument that they used, revealed that the meteorite sample softened, flexed, then surprisingly re-strengthened. It also displayed a quality called strain rate dependent damping, which means that the harder it's hit, the more effectively it dissipates the energy. It's not that complicated of a thing. You recall Union troops were in Fort Sumter in South Carolina. You remember this story? And you remember that they rode out there and told the commander of this Union platoon that was out there manning the cannons at Fort Sumter, we want you guys to get your flag and get your ass out of here. Go ahead and march north. And he said, I can't do that. So they said, well, come sundown, we're going to start bombarding you. And if you're still here at sunup, we're going to come have this conversation again. So sundown came and they bombarded the crap out of Fort Sumter. I mean, they hit it and they hit it and they hit it, and the place just lit up like a candle. But guess what? No injuries. Nobody was injured. The harder they hit Fort Sumter, the harder the fort got. The more direct hits with mortars and cannons and everything like that it got, the outside just graveled up and it became impossible to touch them. So that's where it comes from. The study method provides invaluable data that explain why discrepancies in yield strength observed in previous laboratory experiments differ from evidence of meteor fragmentation in Earth's atmosphere, and that these discrepancies are due to factors such as internal stress redistribution. And that's what happens. You can't predict the point load. The point load goes in all kinds of different directions. It's absorbed by the metal. And you know what happens to metal when you strike it with a hammer. It gets hard. It gets hard because the molecules are redistributed and realigned. And that's how you take annealed metal and make it hard like a sword, is you pound it with a hammer or with a hydraulic ram. It also highlights that these mechanical properties evolve in real time and should not be assumed to be fixed, and may often be the case in existing asteroid deflection models. So researchers chose an iron-rich sample for its relative homogeneity, but more heterogeneous. Space rocks will exhibit different stress dissipation capabilities based on the spatial distribution of their constituent materials. But I'll have to tell you that an M-type asteroid, this is something that's made of metal, is probably going to be pretty uniform. It's going to be nickel, or it's going to be iron, or it's going to be platinum, or something like that. And maybe it could be analyzed at a distance, actually, what it is, but I don't think we have different weapons for different things. A nuclear option may be necessary. It likely won't mirror, the movies. No drilling is going to be necessary. Instead of loading an asteroid with explosives, some physicists propose a standoff nuclear detonation near it. You don't have to hit it. And it will vaporize part of its bulk and deflect its orbital path. And that's probably the best we're going to be able to do, especially if it's at a huge distance. And, if an asteroid is on its way here and it's traveling at, 20,000 miles an hour, we're going to launch a missile or an object toward it, or multiple warhead missile toward it, and it's going to be going about 20 or 30,000 miles an hour. So they're going to be approaching one another. If you remember those word problems from high school math, they're going to be approaching one another at about 50,000 miles an hour. Well, if something is about, 1 million miles from Earth and we're going to launch a missile at it, do the math. 50,000 miles an hour, 1 million miles to travel. How long is that? Yeah. Yeah, it's about 200 hours. So, that's quite a ways. It's over 2 weeks for it to reach out there. And that's a long time to hold your breath. You might want to launch 2 of them. But if you do actually deflect it with the first one, the second one won't reach it unless it's able to steer itself based on radar signatures off of the asteroid. But I would think that you'd probably want to do that with your first missile. You probably want to put some radar steering mechanism on there so that you can do it that way. Okay. Yes. Well, JJ, forging is to heat metal up to a certain temperature. And once it gets to a certain temperature, you need to introduce hydrocarbons to it. Mostly it's oil. So you heat it to a certain temperature. If you put it in water, it's going to anneal it. It's going to turn it soft, like it won't hold the edge at all. But if you get it the edge that you want on it, it's as sharp as you want it to be, it's straight as you want it to be, you heat it to that temperature and you put it in oil. That introduces the hydrocarbons or the carbon to the metal, and that's what makes it hard. Now, you can over-harden it, and it can become brittle. So you need to get it just the right hardness. Go watch Forged in Fire, a couple of episodes of that. You'll see what I'm talking about. Forging is a heat process. Oh, I appreciate that, Tatanka Dave, so much. So, winter is still with us. We're in the beginning of February. I would say in some parts of the country, winter is going to last for about another 2 months. Here in North Carolina, winter per se is going to last about another 6 weeks. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Chat room, Alan, and blessings. Got that. Thank you so much. Let me just check Foxhole really quick. These guys are always on. So now, Tim Walz isn't really the leader. I think Tim Walz created the environment for the fraud and probably siphoned a lot of money off it. That's why they selected him as vice president, because he had access to all this dark money network that they had basically robbed federal money and laundered it. And that's what Biden was doing in Ukraine. That's why Biden got picked as Obama's running mate, because Obama didn't have the money. He didn't need Biden because he was white. He needed Biden because he had the money network in Ukraine. Where do you think Obama got the money to fly to Iran? Remember the cash that he flew to Iran? They came from warehouses in Ukraine. Come on. Anybody that doesn't realize that is a dumbass. So, but Biden's old, and Walz is not that old, but he had access to the money network, and that's why he was picked as Kamala Harris's running mate. Obviously, it didn't work, but now that money network's all discovered. So Walz is not going to run for governor. He's not going to be ever running for president or anything like that again. He's out of politics forever. We will see you right here on Sunday at 8 o'clock at America Free Radio. Please go out and do great things. Look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day. And before long, we will save the planet. All right? We'll see you.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.